Alright, so like Amber said, we have lots of stuff in the next way. The girls are going to go to one room, the guys go to another room, and we're going to hear testimonies from some married alumni and the students from Dress. And then at the very end, we are going to have a question and answer. We have a couple men that have graciously agreed to answer questions from the women, and a couple women that have agreed to answer questions from the men. These are kind of things that, you know, you as a guy you might have always wanted to ask a girl but didn't know how. This is your chance. Obviously keep it appropriate, things like that. Use your discernment and judgment on that. And then at the very end of the day, we are going to wrap up with some worship and fireside. So that's kind of an overview of the day. Obviously you are free to use the bathroom and things like that as you need. This isn't school, you don't have to ask permission. You know, when the speakers are going, we're going to be moving really fast, so just try not to be disruptive and things like that, but feel free to ask questions at the end of their talks. So,
if there's any time left.
If there's any time left, which there probably won't be the weekend.
Yeah, so starting up, like Jasmine said, is Deacon Ed. It's going to start with just a general overview kind of the church and marriage and dating, and he's got it. But.
Yeah, you know, this was very top. Yeah, it's supposed to be dating.
Yeah, so the tree is dating like disciples are named, so we're going to kind of be focused on throughout our talks in different ways how to be a disciple and date and what those things are.
Well, you know, you can probably tell looking at me, I did not have a robust dating life, okay? But my wife did, so, you know, anyway, that's very true. So how is dating as a disciple different from dating like regular people? You have extra people along with you when you're on your date. See, you have God and the Blessed Mother, right? Because if you're baptized, right, you have the Holy Spirit dwelling within you, and then Jesus gave us His Blessed Mother at the foot of the cross as our spiritual mother. So if we're going to date like disciples, see, we're going to have some guests along with us. So that makes a huge difference in how we approach things. And so your goal in dating is finding a spouse you can share your life with. And to have a Catholic marriage like St. Paul describes in Ephesians, which I'll get to at the end of this talk, I hope. Okay? But here's the problem with dating like a disciple today. You know what the problem is? Anybody know? It's our culture. Today's culture opposes everything that the church stands for. You know, I grew up in a much different culture than you did, which I've mentioned a couple of times. So in modern culture, women, they're smart, they don't need men, they're portrayed as sex objects. Sex for women is free, you know, there's never any STDs, there's never any unwanted, unloved children, divorce is fine, etc. And from what I get, I don't watch a lot of television, but men are kind of portrayed like doofuses, you know, they're kind of you know, they don't use common sense, they can't make their decisions, they're kind of sex crazed, not able to do anything right. I mean, now that's my view. You may disagree with that, but that's how I see it. And so how did we get to this state, and how do we reestablish the relationship between the sexes that God established? Because I think it's kind of broken down, in my opinion. So the number one reason why we're in the state we are today goes back about 45 years. And that's when the birth control pill was invented. Prior to that time, women were in charge of the dating relationship. And here's what I mean. When I was in high school, you dated women because you were looking for a spouse. That's really true. I don't know if that's true today, I doubt it. And God has placed in men a sexual imperative. And as the hormones kicked in, you know, they're kind of a driving force in dating. So the boys looked at the girls and they dated the ones they thought they wanted to marry someday. And the boys called the girls, they decided what was going to happen on the date, and they were going to pay for it. They made all the decisions. However, the girls were in charge, and they accepted or rejected the guy, and they were in charge of the sexual relationship as well. Because if they got pregnant, if they were going to have a child, abortion was unheard of. Actually, it was still illegal at that time. And few put up children for adoption, as I recall. But more important, it was expected that the boy was going to marry the girl if he got the girl pregnant. That was kind of the established norm. And actually, one of my friends in high school did get his girlfriend pregnant. I mean, they got married the day after graduation, and they're still married today. I won't tell you how many years that was, because then you'd know that I'm 36 years old. Anyway, so basically, there was little or no sex. In my graduating class, there was, I think, 53 girls, and I think 50 of them, I'm pretty sure 50 of them were virgins at graduation. Okay? I know one for sure wasn't. I know the other one, I know one other probably wasn't, and then my friend, of course. Okay? And really, I'm serious. There was very little sex playing because it was very, there was a cost to it. So now after graduation, a number of my high school friends, they got married that summer. I don't know if that's the norm today either, but once again, it's that sexual imperative. A number of you might ask about contraception. Well, birth control pills had been invented, but the early write-ups in the newspapers, women were getting sick. They hadn't really perfected it, and so it really didn't catch on. Birth control didn't really catch on until the 70s, I think. But you might think, what about condoms, right? Condoms were not very easy to get. They were not sold you could only get them in a drugstore, and they were sold behind the counter. Okay, so in my town of 7,500, there was only one drugstore, and it was run by Mr. Crusoe, who was actually Loretta, my wife's best friend's father. Okay, so you didn't go to Mr. Crusoe and said, "I'll have a pack of condoms, please, Mr. Crusoe." Yeah, it didn't happen because Mr. Crusoe either knew your parents or knew people who knew your parents, and so you went. And then you could go. There was another town about 15 miles away. Now this is out here, of course, I could buy it. But the drugstore there said, "Oh, you're too young to get condoms. Get out of here." So that was kind of the protection, really, of the dating relationship too. So anyway, and so you went to college, and once again, you're aiming to get married, find a spouse. So I was married at 21, Loretta, my wife. She was still a senior in college when we got married, and all my friends were married. Right that summer after graduation, a ton of them were married. Most of them were married within another year or so. But that's the way it was. You got married early. Now, because of our modern culture, everything is flipped. Men don't have to be responsible anymore. As my grandmother used to say, why buy the cow when the milk is free? And so now we have the case that marriage has been kind of divorced from the sexual act. And so guys don't get married now until they're in their late 20s, early 30s. They can really extend that adolescent now. They're not, when I was in high school, college, men were always focused on, what job they were going to get to provide for their family. That was kind of the focus of it. So people weren't going to go on to college. And not as many people went on to college in my days as they do now. They were trying to get a job at a telephone company, whatever it was going to be, so they could get married and have a family, because that was still important. But God didn't intend it that way. I mean, men reaches their maximum fertility. That's not what I'm looking at. High sperm count comes around the age of 19, and then it declines from there. Women are, I think, in their early 20s. But now when you delay marriage till your late 20s or early 30s, women who've been on birth control pills for a long time, they typically have some problems getting pregnant, and the male sperm isn't as potent as it was when they were younger. And so now you have lots of women with fertility, lots of couples facing fertility problems. So men are the key, I think, and so men have to act on men. I think that men have been emasculated somewhat by women. This is the only tangent I'm going to go off on today. I'm trying to follow my script here because Amber only gave me so little time. But there was a study done. Now, women in the 30s and 40s, the men that were the big movie stars were like Cary Grant and John Wayne and Humphrey Bogart, really strong men, kind of had a beard, deep voices, strong jaws, right? Now, who do women like? very effeminate men. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio, Johnny Depp. I think Brad Pitt's kind of effeminate looking to me. And so I think women, and they don't like men with hair change. I think women have also kind of contributed to that by the kind of men that they like. Another thing is the male movie stars are all really short today. You know, I listen to CNBC, I'm a financial advisor. So they sent one of their anchors to Hollywood I forget the name of it. It wasn't the Oscars, but it's the one before the Oscars. And he was shocked that most of the movie stars, male movie stars, were like 5'6". Said Nicole Kidman was a good foot taller than her husband, whoever that is, but I don't know who it is. But anyway, so things have changed quite a bit. Those are all tangents. I got to get that one. Okay, where were we? So the way God intended the sexes was to complement each other, and for the man to be in charge, leading his family in their spiritual life, to provide for and protect the family, and to make the major decisions in the family. He's really the brain part. And the women were to have the children, raise them, take care of the household, and to support her man. And she is the heart of the family. And this kind of ideal for marriage comes from Ephesians, okay, chapter 5, which a lot of the feminists really attacked in the late 60s, early 70s. And a lot of people, a lot of churches, this comes up around the end of the year or the beginning of January, this reading. Okay, so this is from Ephesians, and this really changed ancient marriage, but listen to it because you might hear about it. This is about wives and husbands. Be subordinate to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives should be subordinate to their husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is head of his wife, just as Christ is head of the church. He himself the Savior of the body. As the church is subordinate to Christ, so wives should be subordinate to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over for her, to sanctify her, cleansing her by the bath of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. And that's a long way of saying that the man's job is to sanctify her wife so that she will be able to enter heaven already sanctified, already prepared for heaven. So husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one hates his own flesh, but rather nourishes and cherishes it, even as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother, and join his wife, etc., etc. But basically, it's all about, I know it's a little difficult when you read Paul, but it's all about the man taking care of his wife and allowing the wife to let his husband serve her. It's a much different approach to marriage and dating today as we have. Much different approach. Now, in those days, this was revolutionary because women really were really second-class citizens. But Ephesians kind of changed it all, and a lot of feminists don't like it. They hear that we're subordinate to men. But really, what they're supposed to do is allow the man to service, take care of it. The man is charged in setting the religious standards in his family. It's always that way in the Old Testament. The men as head of the household were also priests originally. Okay. So for you here today, you need to find someone here in college that has the same values as you. So you need to find someone here in church. You should try to, and for you men, you have to date these women here. And when I go to 5 and 9 o'clock mass, I always sit next to the guys, and I always tell them, bring more guys with you, and please start dating these girls you see around you, because these are the girls you're going to want to marry, because you're going to want to have the same values. And your chances of you finding them when you go home aren't as great. And if you're college students now and you're going to church in our culture today, that says a lot, that you're not downtown at kamikazes, etc., like Allison earlier. Anyway, I blew that. But and if you're currently dating, this is my message to everyone. I know I have affected a number of people getting married early. If you're in college, you love someone, get married. Don't let money be the reason why you don't get married. That's not the right reason. If you can live in college as one person, combining your lack of assets is not going to change your lifestyle at all. Okay? And so, if you love someone, get married. Don't wait. Don't say, well, I got to get a job, and put it off with all those kind of reasons. Those aren't good reasons. And then it also leads to a greater chance to have mortal sins, as pointed out in my directions here. Okay, so questions. I know questions on what I had to say. I had a lot more, but there's only so much I can say. Any questions? Yes.
When you say that much usefulness, like where does the rule of the bathroom play where like the wife knows the husband is using the girlfriend spiritually?
See, if the man isn't doing something that the husband wants to do spiritually.
If the man is using the wife
I can't hear.
Oh, the man is doing something, or like not doing something that the wife wants done spiritually.
Like going to mass
Yeah.
or something. Well, see, that's the problem. See, the men have to be the leaders. See, they have to learn how to be men again. And that's one of their main jobs, is to be the leader in the family. So if they don't, you just have to encourage them, and you have to try to train them yourself, unfortunately. That this is what you expect. If you're going to marry me, you're going to become a devout Catholic. You're going to lead our family because that's your role, right? So, which is that's a big challenge for lots of women. There's a lot more women in Mass than men. Though lately, I kind of watch.
So if you're saying that like a woman can train a man, like where does
You
that
have
line?
you have to do it subtly.
No, I'm just saying, around people at Mass. Like why couldn't it be somebody who's like a following that or Catholic?
There could be. Yeah, you just have to bring back. You just have to train them. You have to be subtle. You have to tell him that I am so good for you that if you really want me, okay, and remember that sexual imperative I talked about, you're going to have to go to Mass with me. You're going to have to become a devout Catholic yourself, because you expect him to lead your family to heaven. Because in marriage, the husband's goal is to make sure that the wife gets to heaven and the children, and vice versa. The woman's role is to make sure the husband does. And I said very shortly about the man needs to make decisions, but the woman has to encourage him in making decisions and then support him when he's wrong. But the man has to also consult the woman. I didn't have enough time to explain all the policy views.
So you said the woman has to support the man even if he's wrong?
Well, in decision making, yeah. You have to let him. You have to let him make mistakes. You have to support him. Okay? You're in this together. Marriage isn't 50-50. It's 100 to 100. Huh?
What if he's making a huge bad decision, but then you say support him anyways?
Right.
If it's a huge decision, like I feel like I'm gonna argue until I get my way.
That's the problem. See, that's the problem. See, that's why women have emasculated men. So men don't want to make decisions anymore. They don't have to make decisions. They don't start it in the dating life. The women call. My son started getting calls from girls when he was in 6th grade and 7th grade. When I went to school, no girl ever called me. Never would have happened. He had to pursue them. It's all flipped. See, and now men are emasculated. And see, so you're going to say, I am going to get my way.
Well, not on everything, but if it's a huge decision, you can't just support him on everything.
Yeah, you do. Megan, please help me.
Just a follow-up to that concern. I think as women, speaking to the women, you do want to encourage and support men and your wives when they do make a decision, that final decision. But the follow-up to that is find a man who sees how this decision is poorly affecting the family and have him make up for that. So if you allow him to make a decision, he sees that it's not good for the family, You want to find someone who is going to reverse that. Okay, does that make sense?
I was just going to say, when I'm saying this on that, I'm talking about major decisions, like going to another town, changing jobs, maybe where you go for vacation, maybe that level. I'm not talking about the drapes or having for dinner. I'm talking about major decisions. You have to support him. He does have to consult with you. And luckily, I'm going to be rescued here. But women, really, you have to let the men be men. You have to train them because they didn't have the same culture that I grew up in. You know, they didn't have the John Wayne kind of culture. The fathers were at church every Sunday. Mothers were at home. You know, I grew up in a much different culture. But we need to, if you're going to debate like a disciple, you have to live in a culture that supports all of that. And so you guys need to hang together. You guys. Thank you for your...
St. Gwendolyn in Fostoria. For those of you who know Marley, he worked with Marley last year, and he is a friend of Andrew's and Father Mike's. He actually studied under Father Mike, so he is going to talk to us about forming healthy relationships or friendships with the opposite sex. So let's welcome Father Matthew.
Let's begin with prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Almighty Father, we give you thanks and praise for this beautiful day, the glorious sunshine and warmth which renews us during this springtime. We thank you for this glorious season of Lent as we continue in our journey of renewal in preparation for the celebration of Easter. And we give you thanks for your great saint, Patrick, who continues to enliven our hearts and gives us joy and inspiration. We thank you for today's presentations. We continue to grow in that holiness of life that you call us to. In Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you. I had to borrow a Bible because I didn't throw one in my bag as I was coming. Let's see if I can find any of what I was going to talk about. So, Jasmine had asked me a little while ago to speak on this topic of forming friendships with people of the opposite sex. Doing it in a holy way. And I was last night having dinner with the housekeeper down in Fostoria. It's great. Andrew's a housekeeper, someone who does my laundry for me. But I'm having dinner with the housekeeper, and she asked what I had going on today, and I told her I was coming up for this, and she looks at me, she goes, "Why did she ask you? You don't have any friends." I'm like, ouch. Thanks, Wendy. You know. But forming friends with an individual of the opposite sex, and kind of an understanding of how do we go about just forming good, holy friendships. Most of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be on the general level of just forming good, holy friendships. It'll be applicable at times to forming friendships with people of the opposite sex. But it won't dwell, primarily on that. So one of the things about our lives is as people of God, as human beings, we have a number of different needs, a number of different longings and desires, and we understand this as being things that have been put into us by the Creator. In Genesis, it tells us in verse 26 of the first chapter, that God created us, male and female, He created us. In the divine image, He created us. And so with that understanding of the divine image, and not to take too much of the steam out of Andrew's talks, but the divine image is the image of communion. When we understand that God is love, that God is Trinity, we understand that God is a person in communion with Himself and then with those creatures that He's created. Us. And so we, as being in the image and likeness of God, are created in the image and likeness of a person in community. So one of our fundamental desires, one of our fundamental longings, yearnings, is for communion. We're meant to be in communion. We're meant to be people who are in great intimacy. Now, a little quiz. In the beginning of Genesis, God goes through and he creates everything. And at the end of each day, he says, and it was good. God saw, all that he created, and it was very good on the end of the last day after man is created. There is one thing, however, that is said in that story of creation that is not good. Does anyone know what it is? There's one thing that is said to be not good in creation. It is not good for man to be alone. So man's isolation is principally a thing of evil. It's a deprivation of what is good. And that good is communion. And so we understand that we as people are called to communion, constantly called into that life of communion. Now, the one scripture verse that I'm going to kind of pull from is from the book of Sirach. And Sirach is one of the wisdom literature books. It is chapter 6, and it begins, I believe, with right around verse 5. True friendship. Sirach 6, verse 5 and 5. A kind mouth multiplies friends, and gracious lips prompt friendly greetings. Let your acquaintances be many, but 1 in 1,000 your confidant. When you gain a friend, first test him, and be not too ready to trust him. For one sort of friend is a friend when it suits him, but he will not be with you in time of distress. Another is a friend who becomes an enemy and tells the quarrel to your shame. Another is a friend, a boon companion, who will not be with you when sorrow comes. When things go well, he is your other self, and lords it over your servants. If you are brought low, he turns against you, and avoids meeting you. Keep away from your enemies. Be on guard with your friends. And here's the main thrust. A faithful friend is a sturdy shelter. A faithful friend is beyond price. He who finds one finds a treasure. No sum can balance his worth. A faithful friend is a life-saving remedy, such as he who fears God finds. For he who fears God behaves accordingly, and his friend will be like himself. And so Sirach, the book of Sirach is kind of that wisdom literature. It's a father's advice to his son. Good Sirach was giving advice to his son. And so he advises, find a friend, a true friend. It's beyond measure. It's a treasure that cannot be told. A true friend. In the classical sense of friendship or love, we're all called to love, and we find that in friendship we do find love. In the classical sense of love, there are 4 senses. There are 4 ways in which we understand love. In fact, the Greek language has 4 distinct words to describe the very levels of love. The first word is storge, and it just simply means affection. Natural affection. It's what a brother would have for his sister, we hope. I wouldn't say what a brother has for his brother, because we all know, I come from a family of 4 boys, there was no love. It's the love that a mother has for her child. So it's that natural love. You don't fall in, you don't fall out of that kind of love. It's there by nature. The next is philia. Philia. The city, Philadelphia, takes its name from this word, philia. It's kind of that dispassionate love of friendship. Philadelphia means brotherly love. That's why everyone calls the city of Philadelphia the city of brotherly love. It's not because the people of Philadelphia are particularly friendly. It's because the name means brotherly love. So this understanding of philia is that dispassionate affection, friendship. The next one is eros. We all know what eros is. It's from where we get the word erotic. It's that love between lovers, between husband and wife, individuals who have a deep, passionate love for each other. And then the final one is the love that Christ always speaks about. It's the word that is used throughout the Gospels when Christ asks, Peter, do you love me? This is the word that he uses. Peter, on the other hand, responds initially with philia. That's why that threefold question is, Christ keeps asking him in Peter's distress. Because Christ says, Peter, agape me? Do you love me with this sacrificial kind of love? That's what agape means. This sacrificial love that you're going to give everything of yourself for me? And Peter responds, yeah, philia. Yeah, philiate. I love you with kind of a friendship. Christ goes, no. Agape me. Oh yeah, philiate. No, wake up. Hello. Agape. Okay, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, sure. So it's this deep, abiding sense of sacrificial love. And that's what we as Christians are constantly called towards. Not just this philia that's, dispassion. Yeah, we enjoy each other, we have great fun. No, agape. Love and self-sacrificing, always in that. Okay? So that's kind of the basis of love and friendship. Well, how do we get into the particulars? How do we form some of these, good friendships, that kind of last? And, what is the aspect of friendship within the Christian life? The notes that you've been handed come from this book here. It's a classic book, The Introduction to the Devout Life, by St. Francis de Sales. It's written in the, 16th century. It was written in the 1500s. That sounds about right. He was a French bishop, and wrote a lot on practical spirituality for every man, for every individual, and tried to instill this sense of devotion. By devotion, he means the kind of spiritual life. That's the word spiritual life. What we mean by spiritual life today is what he means by devotion. So, introduction to that spiritual life. How do we do it? Well, he speaks in his third section on friendship and what friendship is supposed to be about. Okay, and so as we look at this. In his introduction on this friendship, he says, among the passions of the soul, love holds first place. We all understand that. Love is supposed to be what we all strive for, we all strive for. It reigns as king of all movements of the hearts. It turns all other things toward itself and causes us to be like what we love. I apologize, I typed this up really quickly this morning. My fingers are flying through the sheet. So, love. Love is what we're supposed to have. But he goes on and he says, but all love is not friendship. First, because we can love without being loved in return. Well, we know that. And it's just a pretty simple one. We can extend every good wish and love towards another individual, and they can just shoot it right back at us without ever putting themselves into it. So not all love is friendship, because just because you have love for an individual doesn't mean that they're a true friend. He's making a very precise distinction as to what friendship is. He says, in such cases where one loves but the other does not, there's love but not friendship, since friendship is mutual love. So true friendships for him is mutual love. And if it is not mutual, it's not friendship. Secondly, it is not sufficient for it to be merely mutual. Persons who love each other must be aware of their reciprocal affection. And if they are unaware of their love, it is not friendship. So it has to be mutual and it has to be intentional. You have to be aware of it. So an individual, you have to know that you desire to enter into that love and that relationship with them. It's not just a happenstance of, you come together and, hey, we're best friends, BFF. So persons who love each other must be aware of their reciprocal affection. And thirdly, there must also be some kind of communication between them. This is the basis of friendship. So I'd say that understanding of true friendship has to have those three things. It has to be mutual love, it has to be awareness of that mutual love. There's got to be some sort of communication. Now, our world is all about communications these days. Other than medicine, communication is the biggest industry in our world right now. Communications industry is just huge. But we all know, we all understand, we communicate in different ways. Last night, I was sitting down with the pastor after I came back from having dinner and being completely humiliated by my housekeeper. I went back home and sit down with the 7-year-old pastor and have him completely humiliated. No. But he and I sat down, we were talking just a little bit before the end of the night, and made a comment about communication. I don't know where he was starting from with it. I don't know quite what it was all about. It kind of happens sometimes between he and I in our communications. I have no idea where he's coming from or where he's going, but he's there. So he starts talking about communication, and he said it's interesting because verbal communication, or just words, if you're reading words on a page, you're communicating. He said that communicates maybe 5% of the actual message. Our language, when spoken, communicates a little bit more. So if you're listening to a video or to an audio program, a speaker, you're going to get a little bit more than if you just read what he spoke. Because you're hearing the inflection, the pauses, and how it is that he's trying to put those words together. And then another layer on top of that, movements, body language. Body language gives us about, just one more layer of how it is that we communicate. And then finally, facial expressions, which are the ultimate of body language. And in our society, unfortunately, a lot of friendships are, in a bad state right now because our communications have grown by leaps and bounds. We have this great new thing called the cell phone that can do everything except make phone calls sometimes. It can do everything but make phone calls. I hate talking on the phone. My mother will call me and want to talk on the phone forever without saying a thing. I hate it. I'm like, come on. She'll leave like a 30-second pause, and I'm just like, fine, if you're gonna pause, I'll let you sit in your silence because I've got nothing to say. But the text messaging has really hampered our ability to communicate because we've taken our communications and broken it down to just an absolute minimum. The words. And even then, they're not full words. Oh no. All these other different things. I don't know. I can't text speak. I can write everything out for you. So my text messages are always really long. But communication, it's a huge part of friendship, huge part of relationships. It's the paramount thing in a marriage. You have to have communication. Okay? So communication, mutual love, and awareness of mutual love. So I found this an interesting one. I just figured I'd throw it in. That third line there, that third paragraph, on friends with benefits. This isn't a new creation. It's like, what? St. Francis de Sales was talking about back in the 16th century on friends with benefits. He didn't call it friends with benefits. The gist is there. He says, exchange of carnal pleasures involves mutual inclination and animal allurement. It has not more right to the title of friendship among men than that of asses and horses for like effect. So just because you're sleeping with someone doesn't mean that it's a friendship. That's what he's trying to say. He goes back to that point. Friendship is so much more. In marriage, there is communication of life, work, goods, affection, and indissoluble fidelity, and therefore married friendship is true, holy friendship. That's why marriage is such a great friendship, because of all those things. And so in like manner, our friendships among ourselves should kind of model that, but with just slightly less intimacy. I spoke earlier about that aspect of intimacy. We all desire and long for intimacy. And intimacy isn't just on the physical level, but it's emotional and spiritual as well. We all need emotional and spiritual intimacy, as well as physical intimacy. Now certainly, sex within marriage is the high point of physical intimacy. But even beyond that, we all do have a need for physical intimacy. What do babies need the most? They need to be held, they need to be caressed, they need to be nurtured. If a baby is not held, caressed, and nurtured, the baby dies. And you can feed a baby all you want, but if it's not held and nurtured and caressed, the baby dies. So we all have a need for physical intimacy. We also have a need for those other things. And I would say those are more important. for the aspect of psychological, spiritual, and emotional intimacy. I myself, as a priest, had a deep need for that as well. I take physical intimacy out of the range of the purely carnal and sex into the aspect of, we do need physical intimacy. A person lying on their deathbed needs physical intimacy. That's why every time I go to the hospital, I take a person's hand and I hold their hand. Make sure they know the touch of physical intimacy. But we all need that spiritual, emotional, and psychological intimacy. And that was one of those things of my own life that as I grew in my vocation, that I had to learn. And especially intimacy with young women. It was one of those. I grew up in a family of boys. The first girl that I really ever knew was my sister-in-law, and I was 20, going on 21 when my brother got married to her. I first met her when I was a senior in high school. But it's one of those things of we all have a need for good friendships and intimacy, and especially intimacy with someone of a different sex, because God created us male and female for a reason, because we complement and we complete each other. And so learning how to have healthy, intimate friendships with a person of the opposite sex is a good and holy thing. And it's something that helps us to continually grow and improve and better ourselves. And so in my own life, I had to learn that, and with different degrees of success. I can remember I was on my internship in Maumee, and around November or so, a young woman had moved into the area and began helping with youth. And she and I got to be very good friends. And it was one of those things, and we had a great friendship. We got together and got along very well. It terrified the young associate who was at the parish, because he didn't quite understand it, and he was scared to death that he was going to lose me, to this girl. And he came to me at the end of the internship, and we had a conversation, and he goes, "Man, I was just scared to death, especially that day when I came home, and you had walked in, and she was right behind you, and you guys were heading out to do something." He's like, I said, "I understand." And so learning how to do that is very paramount. So learning those different intimacies. So that final thing on just under the aspect of friendships, Saint Francis points out that there are varying levels of friendship. And this one, friendships that are based on sensual pleasures or external pleasures, or external senses, not just necessarily sex, but things that are, as he describes it, pleasure in looking at beautiful things or hearing a sweet voice, pleasures of touch and light. These are friendships, but they're friendships that are proper to the age of young people, lovers whose virtue is only in blossom, whose judgment is only in bud. And so it's one of those things that he's trying to say, yeah, this is okay, but you should be desiring something more. Why is this only okay? Because we should desire something more. He goes on in his next section on fond loves. He calls those previous loves that are based on external senses on frivolous friend. He calls them frivolous friendships, fond loves. And he strongly discourages them. Why? Well, because by them the hearts of men and women are caught, bound, and entangled together in empty, foolish affections, based on frivolous exchanges and low pleasures. Ordinarily, such foolish loves collapse and are involved in carnality and the most lewd and sordid conduct, though this was not the original intent. What he's saying is, if your friendship is only based on flirtations and, kind of the way you guys look, or because this person makes me feel good, well, even if you enter into that relationship with the most, the highest of intentions, it's very easy for that relationship to slip and to fall into something that's less than ideal. And so he's saying we should base our friendships not on these external senses of how a person looks, how they feel, the sound of their voice, the fact that he's, kind of a funny guy, or, she really, talks about all these great, wonderful things. She's a poet, and she can describe how beautiful a flower looks, and, he says we should be looking for something else. No one that voluntarily gives love without in turn receiving it of necessity. He's kind of talking about the trap of these types of relationships. For in this game, one who catches is likewise caught. So if you're in a friendship that is completely based on flirtation and things like that, yeah, it might be a good friendship, you have some fun together, but it's easy to get caught up in that. It's easy to fall into other things. He describes this herb called apraxis. He says, as soon as the herb called apraxis sees fire, it both receives and conceives fire. Our hearts are the same. And this is where the analogy is. Our hearts are like that with love. As soon as they see and are sold on fires with love for them, souls, I think that should be. As soon as they see a soul, yes. As soon as they see a soul on fire with love for them, they are quickly inflamed with love for them. And isn't that true? If we encounter an individual who's just like all about, loving us, aren't we ourselves caught up in that love? He's saying if it's just, based on this, kind of surface level, and there's no depth to it, you can quickly get caught into something that you don't want to be in. And that's the danger. That's what Father Hoyles was kind of speaking to when he pulled me aside at the end of my internship. He said, what's the nature of this relationship that you're in? He wanted to know and to make sure that it wasn't going to go in, that it was on a holy level. St. Francis de Sales goes on and he starts describing true friendship. And what is true friendship? But true friendship is based on charity. It forms those that share virtuous ideals. This particular friendship that I had started developing there in my internship was one that was based on virtue. One that was based on the two of us searching for what is God looking for. The reason that this young woman and I got to be such good friends was because when we first met, she was scared to death that God was calling her to be a nun. She wanted to know what she needed to do about it. And so we started, just kind of getting together and talking the sermon and things like that. And our friendship grew out of this virtue of looking for what God wants in our lives. If the friendships start there with virtue, then there's nowhere else it can go but to virtue. If it starts with God, is continually enlivened by God, it can only go to God. And that's that aspect of friendship. That's what true friendship is. Last Thursday, I got together with this young woman and several other friends as we were getting ready to say goodbye to her. She moved to Minnesota this past weekend. And we got together and we were at another friend's house, a family, and several of us are sitting around the table, and the mother of the house had just had some dental surgery, so she's laying out on the couch. And there's about 10 of us around the table. And we're just talking, laughing, joking, having a great time, talking about things in the church, about God, how our vocations are going. A couple of the young girls are getting ready to be married. We're talking about all these different holy things. And the mother of the house stands up and comes over and she sits down again and she's got tears in her eyes. She says, I'm sitting over there and I'm crying because this is such an awesome conversation. She said, where else do you find so many people gathered together talking like this? This is so beautiful. That's true friendship. That's the friendship that God calls us to. That's the friendship that's meant to be fostered between two individuals, whether they be two men, two women, a guy and a girl. That's the friendship that God wants us to have. Now, that aspect of friendship is not easy. It constantly has to be worked on. It has to constantly be fed with those fires of virtue. So forming those friendships here, is a good thing. Continually bringing each other back to the Lord and building each other up. There's a line that St. Francis quotes from one of the Psalms, Psalm 132. It talks about how good, how blessed it is when brothers live in unity. It's one of those, I love the psalm because it has great imagery. It talks about Aaron and the oil that Aaron was anointed with and how it flows down his hair and down his beard, like Andrew's back there. collars of the robe and everything. No, I don't think of it. But, that aspect of, it's good and holy for us to live in unity. We should constantly foster that, going back to the Lord and building each other up in the Lord. And that's what our Lord desires us. It's able to be done, but it takes work. And when we're constantly working at it, it's something that's able to be done. Were you kind of giving me the 5 minute a while ago? So that's pretty much what I have. There's more notes on here from St. Francis de Sales. He speaks about that, there are good and many friendships that develop between men and women. He points to Jesus, Martha, Mary Magdalene. St. Ambrose loved St. Monica, the mother of St. Augustine, because of her virtue. And also St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare, wonderful friends, deep, intimate friendship based on Christ. St. Francis de Sales had a wonderful relationship with St. Jane de Chantal. Why? Because of their virtue, the desire to build each other up in Christ. So that's the basis. The desire to build each other up in Christ really is nothing. Amen?
Amen.
Amen.
Don't run over. I could talk forever. Not in conversation, but when I'm in front of everyone. I want this to be a little bit interactive, even though I don't normally. When I ask questions, I normally answer myself. I feel compulsed to raise your hand and answer anything, unless I insist. How many of you have ever heard anything about theology of the body? Okay, that's a good start. I'm going to start at the bottom and work up, but I'm going to stop and give practical stuff along the way. So if I had to sit up here for 45 minutes and chatter on about theology, you're already all going to be gone. So theology of the body, if you don't have any familiarity with the teaching, right off the bat, the title itself might be pretty alienating. Theology of the body. What the heck does that mean? Anyone want to take a guess? This is when you're supposed to answer. Theology of the body. Anyone know what the word theology means? The study of God. Any ology is a study, and the prefix is what it's a study of, right? So biology is like the study of natural stuff. Study of life. So like your bio is about your life, and biology is the study of life. Theology, theos, God, ology, the study of God, of the body. What does your body have anything to do with theology? Isn't theology like really boring books? Yeah, Jay?
It's all about the fact that we are made in God's image. So I would call that like the bedrock of all of it.
Right? It's about the fact that we're made in God's image. Did Father Matt say that too? Yeah, he did. Good. We're made in God's image, but how do we put it together? Okay, our body, we're made in God's image, even this part. I'm made in God's image. Made in God's image and likeness. But how is it a theology of the body? Let's put the pieces together. You're supposed to answer this one too.
Finding about God through our body. Studying God.
You can study God through the human body, or our bodies reveal to us and to each other something about the nature of God. So me being here, me giving you this talk, the way I interact with you can literally tell you about God. This is the way we can meditate, right? Because if God created everything, He didn't create it and abandon it. He's not an absent Father. So we can look at any piece of creation and find the traces of the divine. If you've ever seen a beautiful sunset, you might be blown away by it. But that moment can also take you to a different kind of, I don't want to say consciousness because that sounds kind of weird. It can really lift your mind and your heart and change your mood. Right? Or you could look at a flower or a child with their parent, and you see the way that father loves his son, and you're really blown away by it. Well, don't lose that moment. Take that moment and draw the life out of it. God is there talking to us. Right? God doesn't, how many of you have ever heard God's voice audibly? You guys ever hear God's voice audibly? That's cool. But it doesn't normally happen because God's already screamed at us a lot. He's already said a lot, right? So how did God create? Let's cut back to Genesis. How did God create? What action does the scripture that, well, God had this theory of Play-Doh and used his hands and formed it. He said it. God, at everyday creation, it starts with God says. God speaks creation into being. God's words are deeds. And God's deeds are created and loving. They give existence. Right? So God speaks and it's created. So God's already said a lot. Look around you. Everything that's here, God has spoken to the world. Right? And creation doesn't happen and then stop. Right? I don't want to offend anyone, that's kind of a Protestant idea. But God doesn't change, he's eternal. Just accept that. I don't want to explain it. God doesn't change. Unchanged and eternal. If he changes, he's not God. So God can't then create and then decide to stop creating. God is creating. We're being created. We're being held in being by God's providence. We're being held in being. So right now, this very instant, God is loving you. And God is holding you in being. The fancy word is you're subsisting God, or you don't explain yourself. Right? The very fact that you exist tells me that God loves. So otherwise you wouldn't be here. Right? Theology of the body. Our human embodiment, or our fleshiness, the fact that I'm a body and a soul, my body is sacramental. What are our sacraments? Anyone know what sacraments are?
Outward sign of grace.
An outward sign of grace. Okay, what are you going to say? You have something else? You were going to sit down? We'll take that. So we have the Eucharist, and this bread is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. But we can experience it, we touch it, we taste it, we smell it. It doesn't have too much smell. Right? You feel it on your tongue. So there's an outward sign of internal grace. Well, my body is the sacrament of my soul, meaning you wouldn't know that I existed unless you experienced my body. And everything about me is revealed and communicated to you through me, my actions, my words, what I'm doing with my hands. But my body is also, in a sense, a sacrament of God. It's an exterior sign, a visible sign of a grace, of God's love. God created us. If anyone ever denies creation, so you just tell them, I'm here, and try to come up with another explanation for it. And the best they can do is say, well, it was random chance that things somehow, there was some big bang, but then you're like, well, how did the bang happen? And you're like, well, I don't know. So there's not really another explanation or reason, right? But, so the theology of the body, we understand the title a little bit, teeny bit. But, what is it actually? It was the teaching of John Paul II, our previous Holy Father. He started the teaching in 1979, and every week the Pope actually delivers like a little homily or a little teaching as part of an Angelus prayer. So over the course of about 3 years, every week John Paul II delivered one of these talks. So it's like 133 different little talks. If you open up the actual text, each one is like 2 or 3 pages. And he delivers this catechesis over this long period of time. Just imagine going to Rome like in the early 1980s. And like you get there during the talk when he's talking about like marital intercourse. And like you didn't hear any of the 100 talks before that or the 20 talks after. You'd be like, what is he talking about? I just don't know why he did it then. But that's how he did it. So if anyone ever asks you like, what's theology of the body, you can explain what the term means, then where it comes from. You know, these are teachings that are Pope gave us. In little pieces, little bite-sized pieces. Most people think that he had actually written it as a book before he was made Pope. Then this is how he decided to kind of deliver it. he wrote other stuff similar after that in the book too. So that's what it is. Does anybody have any questions over all that? Yeah.
When you say that our bodies are kind of like a sacrament part, so are you talking like in terms of like lowercase s?
Sure. Yeah. That helps. It's not like one of the 7 sacraments of the church is defined by the Council of Trent, but in the meaning of what the word sacrament means, and in a broad sense, and an untheologically defined sense, then yeah. Awesome. Okay, so where does this teaching start? How does he get here? Well, it starts, we can think of it really as a Catholic response to the sexual revolution. The whole sexual revolution, probably starting in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, was this whole movement of kind of liberating sex and sexual expression from kind of Victorian prudishness. And this is a very big generalization. And so with this came this idea, we were going to like free love, free love. And so the idea was that our sexual expression shouldn't be inhibited by old cultural norms. So the ideas of that old culture, that Victorian culture, that Christian culture, those ideas shouldn't inhibit our sexual expression. And so this is where we see like a rupture where, okay, like you could have sex with someone you're not married with, or you can just have sex with anyone. You can have a ton of sex just with yourself. You can just have just all the sex you want. Right? This can be the message, right? In our culture, how do we define responsible sex in our culture? We all get this on college campus. What doesn't have responsible sex?
Friends with benefits.
What could be?
Condoms.
A condom. A responsible sexual act, which is a good sexual act, is what the culture is saying, is one in which you're simply trying to protect yourself from disease. The first of which is probably the worst disease of our entire culture, which is pregnancy. There's a whole branch of medicine and science dedicated to preventing pregnancy. You only do medicine on something you consider an illness. The whole purpose of medicine is to prevent illness, to heal people of a problem. Women, your fertility is under attack in our culture. John Paul II starts with this conversation between Jesus and the Pharisees. I think it's Matthew chapter 18 is the first text he uses. And the Pharisees come to Jesus and say, they're trying to trap him. They're trying to catch him in his own words. They said that the law of Moses allows us to give a woman a bill of divorce if she's committed adultery against a man. So if your wife were to commit adultery against you, you draft up this formal document and give it to her, and she's out of your life. The woman couldn't do the same thing for the man. But they knew his teaching. They knew his teaching, and so they're trying to trap him. But what he takes them out of their cultural context. He doesn't use their premises. He goes beyond their argument. If anyone ever comes and challenges your faith and asks you some kind of a question, like why does your faith deny evolution? Well, when they make that argument at you, they're assuming or already implying certain premises that you're trapped in. So when someone comes and attacks your faith, look at what they say and go beyond their premises. Restate the question before you answer it. It'll really mess them up. Restate the question. Why doesn't your church believe in evolution? And you ask, why do you think my life is purposeless? Why do you think my life is purposeless? Because if we're here because of a random chance of atoms coming together in a certain combination, and then the fact that more desirable attributes, right, are more desirable, so people mate with people with more desirable attributes. So over time, things evolve more and more and more and more until monkeys become humans. Well, what's the purpose of it all? Moses allows you to give your wife a bill of divorce, but in the beginning, it was not so. Moses allows you to give a bill of divorce, in the beginning it wasn't so. It was because of your hardness of hearts that Moses allowed you to give a bill of divorce. Because of your hardness of hearts. Practical applications. When we approach Christ, we need to have an open heart and an open mind. We need to come to Him with an open heart and an open mind. And also, when we're looking for answers to life's hardest questions, look deeper. Look deeper than your feelings and your opinions and what the people in the world around you are saying. Look deeper into the Scriptures. Look deeper into prayer. Look deeper into people that you know are also encountering God. In the beginning, it was not so. Just like with contraception, in the beginning it was not so. Before 1917, every Christian denomination in the world thought that a contraceptive act of sex was a grave, was an extreme sin. Was a grave sin. In the beginning it was not so. Don't accept the reality that's presented to you. Dig deeper. Find the theology in creation, dig deeper, and discover God in it. Go deeper. So this statement, like, time warps us all the way back to the creation story again. It's a time warp. And so what John Paul II does is he says, basically, when we want to understand our humanity, what it means to be human, and what it means to be a sexual human, what it means that we reveal God to the world, we need to go back to the beginning. Because in the beginning, something really terrible happened. That's original sin. And the problem with original sin, it dims our intellect and weakens our will. Meaning if we just look at the fallen world, number one, our mind is a lot weaker than we want it to be, right? How frustrated do you get when you just can't understand something? Does anybody, if you read a book and you just don't understand it at all, is anybody happy about that in this room? No, you're not happy about that. Right? If we just look at the fallen world, all we see is this world marred by sin, broken minds. We need to look back to the beginning. And what did God do in the beginning? Father Matt already said, God created the world, and after creating humanity, God said it was very good. It was very good. This is really important. But what's different about when man was created as opposed to everything else in creation? What was different about the sixth day? What was different about the sixth day? This one you got to answer. It's right in front of your nose? Yeah.
He created man and it was very good.
Yeah, it was very good. Yeah, that was different. What else? Something happened twice on the sixth day. What happened twice on the sixth day? God spoke twice on the sixth day. Every other day, God makes one statement. He said, I'll separate the moon from the stars from the moon, or the earth from the water, you know. He says one statement. If we're so special, if we're so good, why didn't we get our own day? Right? Why didn't we get our own day, God? You ever pray about that? Next time you're in the first book of Genesis, the first chapter, ask God why we didn't get our own day. It'd probably be a pretty good meditation. No, he's saying something to us. We're created on the same day as the animals because we share the physical nature. We have, in a sense, an animal nature as a part of us. It's the beginning of us. We have an animal nature. But there's also more to us. So we have a body. We have passions and desires and feelings. We have a lot of the same stuff an animal has. But there's something more to us. Right? When God created us, He said something different. He said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. In our image, in our likeness. God didn't say that about anything else. Let us make man in our image, What's God like? God knows things. God in a sense is rational, and we're rational. So traditionally this means we have an intellect and a will, free will. In an intellect we can know things. And this is drastically different than the animals. If evolution explained everything, then why aren't beavers getting smarter? And why isn't our national defense plan to kill off all the birds before they get intelligent too and invent nukes? We're really worried about our brand getting nukes, but we're not worried about the deer getting nukes. Right? If it was just evolution, why aren't animals becoming rational? We can teach a monkey how to talk or sign language and different things, but can we teach him to be rational? Can an animal create a language or invent a tool? We'll find out. But we're not very worried about it, are we? Sorry, I'm actually kind of believe in evolution. I believe in more than evolution. I want to deny the hard science. I deny the premise. So we're made in God's image and likeness. And Father Matt hit on this too. How else are we in God's image and likeness? God is a communion of persons. So we're created to be a communion of persons. How do we know it's not a history story in the beginning of Genesis? What's different between the first and the second creation story? There's two creation stories. The first creation story, the animals are made first. The second creation story, humans are made first. Right? It's Hebrew poetry that's speaking to us about the truths of God. It's a theological text and not a history text. John Paul II says there's three conditions to original man that are essential to understanding God's original plan and purpose for us. To understand how we're theological, how we reveal God to the world. The first one is original solitude. Original solitude. God said it's not good for man to be alone. But in some sense, man wasn't alone, was he? He was with God in the garden. He was with God in the garden. In being with God in the garden, there would have been an intimacy there. Adam didn't sin. There was no obstacle between him and God and their relationship. So, original solitude isn't loneliness. It wasn't the fact that Adam was lonely and needed someone to give him company. If the only thing you're looking for in a relationship is company, that's not the only reason to get into a relationship. You're made for so much more, and God can give you company. So just become a nun. Or if you're just lonely, join a religious order. You want more out of your partner than just because you're lonely. Adam wasn't lonely. Adam, original solitude was the full aloneness of being with God. And I think when we talk about theology of the body, a lot of speakers focus a lot on sexuality and sexual purity. But I think they're missing something really important. So I think a big part of our redemption and of learning how my body's theological, or how I'm supposed to love someone else, is returning to original solitude. We have to return to that original solitude. We have to be willing to be alone, but so alone that we're only with God. And we need to suffer through the pain of that aloneness, that loneliness, to grow in a sense of God's presence in our life. No amount of willpower will help you become holy. You'll just be frustrated, trust me. Enter solitude with God. The second one, original unity. So God does create an essential helpmate for Adam, a partner suitable to him. But first he creates the animals. Right? God creates the animals, and Adam gets to name the animals. This action of naming, for the Hebrews, naming somebody means you have power and dominion over them. Right? So you name your child when you have a child. You name them because the parents have a certain power and dominion over them. And this is why the Hebrews would never say the name of God as revealed to Moses. They would never think of saying the name of God because they had no power or dominion over God. They would never state the name of God out of respect, one, but out of the fact that they had the right to say it. Adam's being taught a lesson here by God. This isn't like a really extended divine trial and error, where God's like, well, maybe a giraffe will work. Maybe a gerbil will work. Well, maybe a dog. Well, that's pretty good. Some people are still trying that one. Maybe he'll be satisfied if I create fish or a bird. Birds are cute and they sound no. But God had it figured out. He didn't need any trial and error on this one. God was trying to teach Adam something about himself. Because in the beginning, it's God that says it's not good for man to be alone. Adam doesn't say it's good for him to be alone. God was teaching Adam that he was alone in his creation. None of these animals are suitable, God. I thought you were going to make me an apartment. None of these animals are suitable. And then God puts Adam to sleep, or really ecstasy, puts him in a deep sleep, a deep, almost state of prayer, communion with God, contemplation, and pulls out the rib from his side. Pulls out the rib from his side, and from that forms woman. And Adam says, finally, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. There's this unity between man and woman there. This communion, this seeing into the other person and seeing the other person who they are. Where else do we hear about a rib in Scripture? This is a good meditation. I just figured this out a few months ago. Where else do they talk about a rib in Scripture? Yeah. What happens to Jesus? Yeah.
His side is pierced.
Jesus' side is pierced. Christ is the new Adam. And from his side flows blood and water. Right? Water is purifying and blood is giving life. And from that, there's a new creation born, which is the church. And the new Eve is there, Mary, which is given to us, was given to us as a new mother. So Adam and Eve, who fell into sin, the old order which fell into sin, is superseded by a new order, the new Adam and the new Eve, bringing the order of grace in the church. Another good meditation. So we have original unity, and then finally we have original innocence. This is a neat one. Original innocence. Original innocence meant that when Adam saw Eve, there was absolutely no compulsion to sin or lust in him. When Eve saw Adam, there was no compulsion to sin or lust in her. Right? We said that in the original order, the intellect would be able to know the good, know what's good for you, right? Sometimes we don't even know what's good for us, do we? I mean, you should have been out at 7 a.m. this morning. A lot of people didn't know what was good for them at 7 a.m. this morning. I don't know what's good for me a lot of the time either. But then their will was also stronger. Their will wasn't weakened. So not only could they know the good, but they could do the good that they knew. So when Adam saw Eve, he just saw Eve. Just her person. Her unique, unrepeatable personhood. Her. And when he saw her body, he just saw her beauty. God revealed through her. And in knowing that good, he could act accordingly and freely, without compulsion to sin. When we see a member of the opposite sex, a lot of times we're tempted to see body parts and not a person. To see someone look into their eyes and try to see them as a person. Wow. You have hopes and dreams. You have desires. You have parents. You have life. You could be sad right now. You could look at, they could actually be sad, or maybe they're super happy. There's a whole eternal life. Maybe they just came out of prayer. Adam and Eve had this innocence, and when they went to the Golden Corral and saw that there was steak on the buffet, they would have just had 6 ounces, which is what we're supposed to have, right? A serving of meat. go to Golden Corral, I have like 55 ounces of steak. So they had this original innocence, meaning there was no compulsion to sin. Imagine that. If when you saw someone you had no desire to be drawn toward a sinful way, you just saw their beauty. Any questions over all that? This isn't our original state. Original state. Questions? There's more? A lot more? So the original state, so then there's the fall, right? The serpent comes in. Look at the fruit that's good for eating. Just true enough. You won't die if you eat the fruit. God wants to keep it from you. God doesn't want you to be like him, which is foolishness. Right? There's the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Why do they do that? Like if they had a question, they could have just asked God. Adam and Eve eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil wasn't about Adam and Eve learning anything. Because if they wanted to know something, they could have just asked God the question. Hey God, you're walking around in the garden with me. Like, what's the belly button for? I didn't have a door for it. Why do I have this thing? No, Adam and Eve didn't need to know anything. The temptation was to do it without God. You can know everything, but you won't have to be depending on God. Do it for yourself. You can't trust God. He doesn't really love you. He won't really help you. He won't do anything. He wants to keep it from you. Does this voice sound familiar? We still hear it sometimes. Don't pray. You're not good enough to pray. Who are you think you can approach God? You dirty human. You hear that voice sometimes, don't you? You sinner. How dare you approach God? When you have a problem, go to God and pray. God really, 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 really loves you. Tell the enemy to be quiet. Actually, don't talk to the enemy, just ignore him. Block him out of your mind. The original temptation was not to trust God, not to trust God's love, not to trust what John Paul II calls the freedom of the gift. God doesn't want you to be like him. Well, they were like him. God just said they were. I created man in my image and my likeness. They weren't like him. Then he said, God doesn't want you to be like him. You were like maybe those brownies will make you happy. Well, let's turn to God and make money happy. Maybe not very bad. Might suffer a little bit first. And what after they ate the fruit, what's the first thing they did? Hit fig leaves. Number one, fig leaves. They covered the parts of their body because they could no longer trust the freedom of the other's gaze. Right? When Eve saw Adam's eyes, you have to keep in mind, these other people, I'm a sinner. I'm a sinner. And so you don't want to show your whole self to me. Trust me, you know. I sin good. Maybe Ryan's. I don't know. Yeah. So you cover yourself, right? Adam and Eve experienced an original shame. But not an unhealthy shame, not a morbid shame, but a shame to protect themselves. Right? Because we don't know how the other person's going to see us. They also experience a disunity and a loss of self. They hide from God. They're afraid of God for the first time. Imagine that. God is really frightening. He's all powerful. Not just like really powerful or like the most powerful, but he's all powerful. He can undo you in no time. And I really mean no time, because he's outside of time. Right? Like God's something to be, but they never feared God because they had this unity and solitude. We're called back into that unity and solitude. We have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. And so we can approach God knowing that he loves us. He really does. He died for you. You're like, prove it, God. And he gave you some prophets. And you're like, prove it, God. And then he gave you a son. And like, prove it, God. Then the son died for you. And then he's like, prove it, God. And he's just like, sacraments? And you're like, prove it, God. Then he gives you like people that love you. Prove it, God. Oh, nature's beautiful too, by the way. He's really like, he's our already said a lot to us. A lot of times he doesn't need to say anymore. The redemption, we're going to fast forward. The redemption. How does the redemption work? Well, we have this fancy word called eros, and this other fancy word named ethic. So in the Old Testament, there's a lot of laws, a bunch of laws. There's the Ten Commandments and other laws. We have a lot of laws in our culture. And so the ethics are the laws, the rules. Do this, do that, do the other statements. Our ethos is this whole complex of desire and attraction and passion inside of us, right? I'm attracted to not kill you. Right? Not only because I'm going to be thrown in prison, but also because I don't want to kill you. But I'm really not attracted to follow the speed limit. I speed all the time. So I like to get places fast. Right? My ethos, my complex of desires is not in line with that ethic. The ethic is eat a healthy amount and stop when you're full. Well, my ethos is that I like steak, and I love wine and potatoes. And then there's ethic, and so now I'm on Weight Watchers, which is bringing my ethos in line with the ethic. And I've lost like 18 pounds. It's only like 3:30, it's not that much. I'm started this. So you have this ethos and ethic thing, and a lot of times when we approach Christianity, or when the outside world sees Christianity, what they see is a big set of laws. Like one of them that a lot of people don't like is, well, we don't think contraception is very good for you or anyone else. We think it's going to hurt you, actually. So we say, don't do it. And they see this law, this ethic, and people are like, I don't want that. Don't impose these laws on me. It's like when you get rid of your Christianity is when you get the monkey off your back, you get like this weight off your back, you can just finally do whatever you want. But we have this huge fallacy in our culture that freedom is the possession of options. If you want to deny that, just go into the supermarket. You're the least free in the supermarket. There's a lot of options. Not a lot of them are good. The possession of options doesn't leave us free. Because if we just do what we want, a lot of times we end up bound by it, enslaved by it. Right? Just ask an addict. Ask someone who's addicted to something, and ask them if simply the possession of options and choosing what they wanted left them free. They're going to say no. Because their choices enslave them. And sin enslaves. Freedom is to know the good and to have the ability to do the good. The more you sin, the less capable of doing the good you're going to be. That's just a fact. You're going to build habits. You're going to build vices, bad habits. And it's going to make it harder for you to do the right thing. The more you do the good, the more you love, the more you're going to build good habits. Good habits don't enslave you. You feel very free when you have a good habit. How many of you have ever regretted exercising? Like, I wish I wanted to exercise yesterday. I feel so terrible about that choice. Maybe you did it too much. Maybe like you're like, oh, you said something negative about your body, and then you exercise for like 2 hours when you haven't exercised in 5 years. And you're really sore. Well, you didn't choose the good for you. You should have done like 15 minutes. I only do 15 minutes. So we want to choose the good. We don't regret good choices. But this is all written in our bodies. Our bodies are theological. They reveal to us something about the nature of God. The good news of the gospel isn't just that Christ gave us a bunch more rules to follow, because he certainly did. The Hebrews had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rules. But on the Sermon on the Mount, God took it all and made it harder. He said, Moses tells you, don't commit adultery. I tell you, if you so much as look at a woman or man with lust in your hearts, you've already committed adultery against them. The Ten Commandments say, you shall not kill. But if you so much as hate your neighbor, you've already killed them in your heart. Right? Jesus brings a lot more rules to the table. But the good news isn't that we have more rules, more ethics to follow. The good news is that we have tools to have our ethos changed. Tools to have our ethos change. I don't need the commandment, thou shalt not kill, because I have no desire to kill anything. I don't. I need the commandment, thou shalt not kill. Sometimes. Because if I'm overeating, I'm kind of choosing to kill myself. Because if I keep eating unhealthily, I'm going to have a heart attack, maybe diabetes. I'm going to maybe be morbidly obese and unable to exercise. If I keep eating, I'm choosing to die. Choosing to kill myself. My ethos isn't in line with that ethic right now. I need Weight Watchers gives me some great tools, and you might pray with it too. That my ethos can come in line with the ethic and I can be healthy. Same, if you need the commandment, if you so much as look at the other with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery. If you don't need that commandment, then bravo. Good for you. Let's talk afterwards. I want to see what you got. I want to know what you're doing. But some people really don't need that commandment. Some of the great saints, I don't think they need that commandment. It's possible that just as much as you don't want to kill me in your lifetime, you could not want to lust after me. You could not want to overeat. You could not want to oversleep. I want to hit on two more points. John Paul II introduced this really interesting idea called the language of the body. The language of the body. We've all heard about body language, right? Like when I move my hands, it means like pay attention here. Or like I'm relaxing, I'm going to come back here and sit. Right? This whole time I've been talking to you, my body has said a lot that my words haven't. Well, the language of the body is something deeper than that. This is kind of the tip of the iceberg, body language. It's something deeper. What it means is that every time I do anything, even when I speak, sometimes what I say isn't what I mean. And if you don't believe that, start dating somebody. If you want to know that you're a sinner, start dating someone, because the worst of you is going to come out. And that's the truth, because you become really comfortable around this person, and all of the fig leaves start coming off. Hopefully someone will wait till you're married to come off. But when you get down to your core, it's really easy to sin and hurt the person you love the most. If you really love someone, you're going to love them the best, and they're going to make you the best version of yourselves. But the worst version of yourself is also going to come along. And you're going to be called to love like God loves. Because a real community isn't one where everyone acts like they're perfect. A real community is where everyone's willing to just be their sinful selves, suffering and striving for virtue. And if you're really in community with each other, you're going to say, I don't like that you're sinning, but I'm going to love you anyways. I'm going to love you anyways. Why do we sin? Well, what's the enemy's first temptation? God doesn't really love you. You can't trust him. Do it for yourself. That's kind of like the temptation, the prototypical temptation. If we really believed wholeheartedly with all of ourselves that God loved us, we won't sin. The truth is we're just not convinced yet. It's hard to live with when we put it down that simply. But we're called to love ourselves too. So in a real community, in a real relationship, say, I'm going to love you anyways. You forgive. One of my spiritual directors had this friend that went to this fancy college in Rome to study spirituality. And his whole doctorate was on the fact that saying, I'm sorry, and I forgive you, is just saying, I love you in context. It's just saying, I love you in context. I thought that was better. The language of the body, so all of my actions have objective meaning. So if I slap you, no matter what my intention was, it means I want to hurt you. Unless it was a complete accident, like I was cutting and a knife slipped. That's the way it's really mine. The language of the body. So everything we do says something. And this is going to be my kind of hitting the last points here. Okay, so we got ethos and the language of the body. So everything says something. What do you think sex says? You're promising forever. Right? What else does it say? What's your body saying? Yeah. Emily?
It's total giving of yourself.
You're totally giving yourself. You're breathing. You want to bring life. I mean, unless you're stopping.
What was your question?
What's the language of the body during sexual intercourse? A handshake says hello. I respect you, maybe. Maybe the way you shake someone's hand. But what does that say? It means, this is Christopher West, it means that your love is free. I'm choosing to give myself to you. There should be a freedom there. It's total. I'm giving my whole self to you. I'm not holding anything back. It's faithful. Right? I choose you in particular. Just you. Hopefully. And it's fruitful. Free, total, faithful, and fruitful. What does this remind us of? Who loved each other freely, faithfully, totally, and fruitfully? That whole free, total, faithful, and fruitful thing comes from actually the wedding vows in our liturgy. Christopher West determined this. He looked at the wedding vows and their right to marriage, and what comes before the vows and the content of the vows themselves: promise, faithfulness, truthfulness, totality, and faithfulness. Who loved each other faithfully, fruitfully, totally? Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve and Jesus and Mary. Perfect. Got it. That's really important. Adam and Eve loved each other freely, totally, faithfully, and fruitfully. So what do the wedding vows do? What's the magic there? That all of a sudden, like, you can't have sex with the person, and then you say a couple words to each other, then you do have sex with the other person. Like, what's the magic? What's that? You know? What does it do? A covenant. A permanent promise, a covenant with God there. God's the more than a covenant. This one you must answer. It takes you somewhere that you're not. It takes you somewhere that you're not already in your relationship. What are you promising? Lauren, you got this. I believe in you. Huh?
Promising to be forever.
Yeah, promises the forever part.
You're becoming one.
You're becoming one. And who love each other like this? We just said this. Who love each other freely, totally, faithfully, fruitfully? Adam and Eve, and Jesus and Mary. The wedding vows, a permanent promise, a covenant, re-establishes the relationship of Adam and Eve before the fall between the husband and wife. The wedding vows, you're up there promising, I'm going to love you like Adam and Eve loved each other before the fall. You're making a covenant to seek salvation together. And then that's why it's appropriate that you take off the fig leaves. Because in that covenant relationship, you trust the words of the other person, you trust each other. Trust is fig leaves too. You trust the freedom of the gaze, the freedom of the gift, the purity of the gaze. So we don't take all the fig leaves off before we're married. Because that person could, you might really love each other and really feel connected. You might get separated still. Time does a lot of stuff to relationships. Yeah. So that's kind of where I want to leave you guys. Lauren.
You said that part of the God was to make a covenant with God there, but can't you make covenants other places with God there also?
Yeah, we can make other covenants too.
Yeah, but wouldn't God be there also? Because like where two or more gathered in His name, He will be there. So like, what's so special about the church aspect of it when?
Right. The church is involved. Well, see, Christ raises marriage to the sacramental order. So marriage has always been there from the beginning. And then, in a sense, marriage is kind of the prototype for every sacrament. Because all the other sacraments are God saying, I want to be in communion with you, and I want to bring spiritual life into the world through you. So marriage says something to us about all the sacraments. Married people that love each other the right way really teach us about what it is to be church and what it is to be in a relationship with God. To love each other the right way, not the wrong way. We can get a lot of deformation in this area too. So why does the church need to be involved in all this? Is what you're asking. God raises marriage to the sacramental order. And so what this means is that really there's kind of a special grace that flows through it, a supernatural grace that flows through it. And you are picking up something intuitively, because the church teaches that the husband and wife are the ministers of the sacrament to each other. But it also teaches that you can marry someone that's not baptized or not Christian, but if you do that, your marriage is not a sacrament. It's a natural bond between two people. You can get a dispensation for it. The church is there as a witness. The church is there as a witness. The priest is there as a witness to the bond. And this is important because, well, Christ gives Peter the keys, Matthew 16:18. And with that keys comes the power of binding and loosing. And that statement with the keys goes all the way back to the Old Testament, where in the Davidic kingdom, wasn't like the kingdoms we see on King Arthur movies and everything, but in the Davidic kingdom, if you read, like King Solomon had hundreds of wives. So which one was the queen? The queen was Bathsheba, who was Solomon's mother. In the Davidic kingdom, the queen was the mother of the king. And then he also appointed a prime minister or a viceroy who received the keys to the kingdom, received the keys to the city of Jerusalem. And with those keys came the mantle, which gave to the viceroy, the prime minister, all the power and authority of the king. So what does this mean for our church? Well, we have Christ the King. The queen is his mother, Mary. And with those keys comes the power for Peter to bind and loose. So while we have a priest there, or deacon, as a witness, is that power of the church flowing through that minister. The power of the church flowing through. If we were not fallen, if we were still in a state of grace, we wouldn't, if we weren't fallen, we wouldn't need the priest there. If there wasn't a priest there for everyone need. The sacramental order is only necessary because of the fall. A sacrament in like the formal sense, the big S, again, they said the big S sacrament, is a guaranteed pathway of grace. So God isn't bound by the sacraments, but God chooses to use the sacraments. Right? You can sit there and pray, I'm sorry, till you're blue in the face, but you could just be deceiving yourself. We're really good at deceiving ourselves. But the sacrament of confession is important because we have that guarantee of God's grace through the ministry of the church. Through the ministry of the church, are granted pardon and peace. And also, marriage isn't really just between the husband and wife. A marriage is really a joining of two families. And also a new bond in the whole family of the church. So the church is a community. It's kind of like a big family. We're the body of Christ. And so the marriage isn't just the two people off on their own, just by themselves the rest of their life. But even when you're married, you're part of your families and you're part of the wider community of the church. So the priest is there as a witness of the whole community, or the head of the community, Christ in the community, witnessing the bond. And you need to be too. Does that answer the question? I don't know. I come on. I'm sorry.
So Emily's going to be around for a couple more minutes, a few minutes if you want to talk to him, but we're going to take a break, and there are cookies and cupcakes back there if you want to get any. Get up and move around a little bit. Make sure you found the right person when you marry. How to find the right person in marriage, and I'm really excited to learn a lot of great things from Father Mark.
Actually, my invitation came out of a conversation we had once, so I will try to. So yeah, I was thinking about what we had talked about, what she said she wanted me to talk about. I was thinking, how do you marry the right person, including Jesus? You know, if you're called to a vocation, you know, to a priesthood or religious life. You know, how do you find that? Gosh, a little bit about me. I'm 52. I was born in 1960. I grew up in South Toledo, OLPH parish. My mom and my dad are both converts to Catholicism. My dad, his parents came over from the boat to Ellis Island. They grew up in upstate New York. His dad died when he was 13 through the Depression, 8 kids. My dad really did walk uphill to school both ways. I mean, it really was, you know, and he has dementia now, but he's still hilarious. They were probably raised some kind of Orthodox, you know, in Romania, but there was no religion, they just had to survive. My dad was distributing newspapers, delivering papers, and a kid that he knew that he delivered with would always kneel at the Angelus bells, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or whatever it was. And my dad was so struck by this kid's piety that my dad was actually called to go to the priest himself at 15 years old and join the Catholic Church. Again, really being raised in no religion. My mother, on the other hand, was raised in Calhoun County, Gilbert County, West Virginia. Maybe about an hour, you know, and 15 minutes southwest of Parkersburg down Marietta. If you ever know that area. And very hilly, very rural. And she was raised Baptist. Dad was in the war. They met. She's 12 years younger. They married. Actually, to the day that my grandparents died in their upper 90s, they still never knew that my mother converted. You know, they just, you know, they knew we were Catholic. But what does it have to do with anything? I just wanted to. I went to St. John's, went to Notre Dame, and then lived 9 years out east before entering seminary back here. As a priest, I help people to prepare for marriage, and I help people to be able to heal when they want, after divorce, when they want to be able to marry again. So, you know, and certainly I had that whole struggle myself of being able to see, not until 31 years old, about what was God was calling me to do. And really, priesthood was not really my idea. You know, I ran as long as I could, in some ways. So marriage, when people come and they fall in love, you know, what marriage is, that commitment means that I am yours forever. It's a bond. We ask God to bond 2 people's souls together forever. You know, that's what we want. We want God to bind 2 people's souls together forever. And what I like to say is, you want to find a good fit. You want to find the right person. Not that there's only one person for everybody in the world, but you want to find a good fit. This is what that means. That what you have to do just to stay together, you know, don't drive each other nuts and really care for one another, automatically is designed to be able to bring you and grow closer together to each other, closer to God, and closer to the person God made you to be. That sounds nice, doesn't it? You know, it sounds so romantic and so nice. But just see, people who've been married before or been together a long time, you know that this whole nice process of growing closer really is one of selflessness, growth, and giving up. Because invariably, you're usually attracted to someone who is complementary. It's another nice word. You know, one person is always hot, one person is always cold. One person has no concept of time. You know, the other person is very, very concerned about time. You know, one person is very detailed. One person would not know a detail if it struck him on the nose. Not that I can relate. And so, when you've got this kind of complementarity, oftentimes there's a lot of compromise. If you've ever dated anyone, a lot of times there's a lot of compromise, and I think there is a lot of dying to self. When you really care about someone, there's a lot of dying to self that goes both ways. And if it's the right fit, right? Then what happens is that relationship is the workshop, is the playing field, is the means that God uses to help us to grow. To help us to grow as an individual, to help us to grow as a Christian, as a human being, help us to be able to let go of some of our selfishness and being able to really be able to give to the other, and vice versa. And then that's what brings it so much life. And I think, I look at my own parents who've been married 60-some years, and it still goes and it changes, but it's still that's why it's so important to marry the right person. If you marry the wrong person, oftentimes no matter how hard you try, it just doesn't work. And it doesn't bring you closer to your real self. And it's really painful. Some of you may, have people who are divorced in your family, maybe even your parents, brothers and sisters, or good friends, yourselves. The Catholic Church believes that what God has joined, no one must separate, right? So when it's the right fit, right? When it's the right person, then we just believe, look, sooner or later, you're going to continue to grow and deal with all your issues together. But this other person is the relationship, is the structure in which you have to use to grow together. But if you marry the wrong person, no matter how hard you try, it really doesn't work. Personally, I get a little frustrated, and that is a real understatement. When people say things like, the trouble with people today is they just don't try, in marriage. There's divorce and people don't try. I want to scream. Because those people are so naive and so judgmental, and they are so clueless. They have not been in offices with people who have been together and knew they married the wrong person, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. Sorry, I'm getting upset. They haven't talked to people who have been in this marriage and have tried to stay together, and they just married the wrong person, and it's just not there. And so it frustrates me when people say, people don't try at marriage. That is not my experience. My experience, though, is that oftentimes people marry the wrong person. So after a divorce, which is painful and awful, when people are healing and wanting to marry again, the church still assumes that first marriage, remember what God has joined, no one must separate. Remember, the Catholic Church gets a bad rap. We get a bad rap. But see, the Catholic Church, it's an institution. It's 2,000 years old. And the bishops are like holy accountants. I know this is going to go, but no offense anybody. But their job is to be able to pass on the tradition. And they can never say anything is right that isn't. We can never contradict. So in a marriage, what God has joined, no one must separate. And if that bond is there, we must do everything to be able to keep that bond. What an annulment says is that from the beginning of the marriage, the bond didn't form. There was some impediments blocking that bond going and fusing their souls together forever. So please tell if you know of anyone who's thinking about this and hesitant to have an annulment after a divorce because they think it means that the children will be illegitimate. They don't understand annulment. Do you remember Britney Spears, right? What was it, 5 years ago? 5 years ago, she married some guy from high school for a day. Right? Remember, they were drunk or something. No offense to Britney Spears, but the day after, they went to the courthouse and got a civil annulment. You with me? So when you get a marriage, you get a marriage license, and you're married by the state of Ohio, County of Wood, right? And so, but they wanted that annulled, which means it never happened. A church annulment is different. A church annulment, the people really were married. They were civilly married. They were married by the state, married by the county. With me? And if they were married in church, They did everything, that they could to be able to ask God to bring their souls together. But in Romans says that third level, the spiritual level, the soul level, that we wanted to ask God to bind their souls together forever, there was impediments blocking that. Immaturity, etc., a list of things. So annulment does not mean that they were married, the kids were illegitimate or anything. It just means that from the beginning that bond wasn't there. I'll get good in a minute. And this is all vital to tell you what I want to tell you. So that's really important. So the question then becomes, why are there so many divorces? I tell you, I'm no famous speaker, and I've never heard anyone else say this, but I'll tell you from my experience, the reason why there are so many divorces is people marry the wrong person. I had a guy in marriage, I always say this in marriage, I had a fiance, a groom to be, looked at me once and said, duh. Well, see, I think that's a very telling duh, because the duh comes 10 years later after the divorce, right? And so often afterwards, people look at each other going, why did we ever do this? So we are not meant for one. And no matter how nasty and hurtful the divorce is, very rarely do you have people saying, you know what, we really should still be married. No, it's more like, no, that bond isn't there. So the question, the elephant on the table, the obvious question is, why do perfectly sane people marry the wrong person? And I would maintain that my best guess in theory is that they are not sober when they're married. They're not really sober, and they are under the influence, of a drug when they get married. And this is not marijuana or any of the street drugs. It's not alcohol. It's the power of human sexuality. One of the things that God uses to bind the souls together, with me, one thing is the marriage act. Sexuality is and sex is so powerful. Theologians who are Catholic around the world, the most traditional, the most progressive, everybody in between, says that probably the closest that we will ever get to feeling the presence of God as we walk in human bodies and on the earth is the union of husband and wife in a committed sacramental marriage. That's a powerful statement. That's strong. That's what the church believes about sexuality. And how powerful that is and wonderful that is. The problem is, when people are together in that way, I think that God goes with His Spirit and binds the souls together. And it is designed to do that after the marriage commitment. But in our culture, 15 years after artificial birth control, our culture has been able then to be able to use sexuality and allow people to go to that place without the possibility of children, theoretically. And then therefore create a culture in which sexuality and making out and having sex can be another thing I can do to fill the emptiness inside of me. Just as people deal with their problems and all that pain, emotional pain of life, with trying to get a little buzz on with alcohol. You might be able, if you walk around town, to be some evidence of that today on St. Patrick's Day. Or other kinds of drugs or food. I got a big belly. I want to know how I can give up pop. No Mountain Dew, all that no sweets, no candy, no cake, and I'm still gaining weight. It seems. Not that you care. But, so we have a situation. This is just kind of my theory from experience, is that so oftentimes if people are sexually active before marriage, they really feel in love. And they feel so much caught up in love that they think that's what love is. And they really believe when they get married that they're in love. But have you heard of the 7-year itch? You know, I think Marilyn Monroe was in a movie or something. But that whole, about 6 or 7 years into marriage, oftentimes the sexuality and that kind of energy changes and dies down some. It's not as strong. And oftentimes then that's where people look at each other and go, there's nothing here. And there's not the complementarity. Maybe I didn't really marry the right person. We're not really growing together. We don't really communicate. And so I think what's really hard is oftentimes, I've had people say to me, during the annulment process, and pause, I am very positive about the annulment process. I think if you know people, they really need to talk to someone, help them through. They can be very healing. We get a very bad rap for that people don't understand what annulment means and how healing it is and how good it is. And it's really not that hard. And I think people are afraid of it because they don't really want to go back there, but it's designed to heal. I think it's really important then to be able to say, I think what happens is that people tell me, they say, Father, I knew this and that about him or her, but I just thought it'd be different after we were married. And you may have heard it, I just thought it would be different. I thought that would go away. I thought things would change. Or they just thought everything would be fine. And I just think that union is so powerful that I think people say, this is so good, how can this not be right? And so when I work with couples, I always say to them, even if they're living together, to me, it's not about living together. The church is teaching about living together. I think it's more really about being together in the married way. Being able to have intercourse together. That's really, it's the sexual thing. That's what's wrong, because you don't want to say, I'm yours forever. You see where I'm going? You don't want to say, I'm yours forever with your body before you've been able to get there with your emotions and the commitment. Now, I'm sorry, this is too heavy. But I think that's really important. And I tell people, I say, you have the rest of your marriage to enjoy that. You want that dust to settle, because you want to do, I call that the dust of the sexual energy, right? You want that to settle, because you want to do every single thing you can to make sure that you are sober in your mind, to be able to make sure that you're marrying the right person. Because my parents, in almost 97 and 85, I don't think that their sexual energy and relationship is really the most important thing right now. Because my mom was taking care of my dad. But what love and what thing keeps that a long time is the complementarity. It's how God made them one. Now, of course, the sexual part is really important, but it's only one thing. It's what we really want is love. That's what we really want. Whenever we feel any kind of sexual energy and any kind of wanting, either someone we're dating or someone we're not, or any kind, that is a physical manifestation of the need for God. That's what it is. What we really want is God. What we really want is the other. We want to be filled. We want love. That's what our bodies are saying. And usually, that libido type energy is usually the highest, in my experience, when we're not taking care of ourselves. We're not getting enough sleep, or good food, or exercise, or real relationship, or real friendship. So this is not a downer. This is a very positive thing. So what she wanted me to talk about today was, okay, so what do? Then what is dating? Then what is, so the thing, what I'm suggesting is as you're dating, you want that sexual energy to die down so you really know you're marrying the right person. Parenthetically, I also don't think that God really wanted people to date, you know, and be dating 10, 12 years before they're married. You know, or have these long engagements. You know, Mary was probably, you know, married to Joseph at 14, 15 years old. You know, I think that's the whole, people waiting so long because they're saving up for the wedding. You don't want me to go there. And really, I love weddings. A lot of priests say they don't like weddings. I love weddings. Weddings are wonderful, but the wedding's all about the vows. And I always tell people I think sometimes, once again, they want the big part. Oh my gosh, that show I watched last night for 5 minutes too long. It was 5 minutes total. But you know, it was just like these women just wanting to buy these dresses to be the princess. I mean, what we really want is someone to share life with. We really want God. And of course, it's nice to have a nice wedding. It's nice that the groomsmen shower. You know what? It's nice that there's food when you get to the reception. You know, of course, and it makes it special. You know, it makes it special. I always tell couples I have one rule of weddings, and this is gonna sound very arrogant of me, but it's true. I say if we follow this rule, this is gonna be the best wedding any of your guests would have ever been to, unless they've been to another one of mine. But my rule is, this is not Broadway. The wedding is not. This is not like an opening on Broadway where the critics are going to say, "Oh, Father was kind of hunched over." But you know what? That second couple, he was a step ahead of the other. And you know what? They didn't. She did not genuflect 3 times for her bouquet. You know, it's just like it's prayer. No, it's nice to have a ritual, but it's prayer. And why that's important? You're going to love this. Remember this for your wedding. If you're trying to pray, you can't pray wrong. If you're trying to pray and your wedding is prayer, binding you two together, nothing can go wrong. Kids can throw up, things can catch on fire. Seen it all. Things can fall over. But it'll just be memorable, right? Because you can't pray wrong. That nothing can go wrong, right? Because you're praying. All that stuff happens in Mass, you know. But like we don't have a bad Mass because, you know, something happens, kids throw up. You know, I've had the rescue squad come to the back of the church, someone got sick. I didn't even notice. There's been times that it comes, because you know what? I'm praying. I'm in the zone. You know, I mean, it's just kind of like, because this is about, you know, I mean, you laugh, but how many times have there been a party? If there was a big party at someone's house and it's a good party, all kinds of things happen. You're not there at every part, you know, because it's about enjoying each other. You know, and it's about, and the wedding is about praying. So, I guess what I'm saying after all of that is our culture, and I'm sure Deacon had touched on this, and how I would say it is, and I guess I fell into this, because I dated a lot before I was a priest, and I was really upset, because I was raised kind of like an only child, went to an all-guy high school, and I just was so, in a way, believe it or not, kind of shy when it came to women, and I was so afraid of being rejected, that I really believe when I saw other people dating and holding hands, I thought, well, you know what? It was the physical touch that would fill the emptiness. It's just not true. What I really needed was social skills. I needed, well, I would say, I call them intimacy skills. And not intimacy, sexuality. Intimacy skills are the ability to give and receive love. The ability to give and receive love. Our culture is terrible at that. We do not raise people to be able to give and receive love very well. And I think this is one of the reasons why so many priests and sisters came from large families. Because when you're in a large family, you have to you learn how to give and receive love. You share rooms, you share, but you also get connected. Also, I bet you, now I have not done a study on this, my guess is though, people that come from large families, strong, good, hard, large families, have a lot of friends. Because it's just natural for them. Right? You raise your hand, right? You can't. What I'm saying is, though, when you come from a large family, I think that you know how to be a friend. And I guess, and this is getting to kind of the topic. So, given all that, I would just say the best way to find the right person is in a way not to look. If you're busy living your life, if you're really busy learning what you need as a person, I'm 52 years old, and I think in the last 5 years I've learned how much sleep do I need? How much prayer do I need? What kind of prayer do I need? What kind of food do I need? What's fun? Now that's hilarious, but it's not that easy. Because often, and in the priesthood, my gosh, there's so many people wanting to, and to be able, and you're so used to giving. What do I need in order to have something to give? And I'll tell you, you laugh, it's not just priesthood. If you're blessed to be parents someday, all of you, I'm telling you, God will make them really cute and you'll love them, but they will suck every single iota of energy out of you. But you'll love it. You'll be in a way that, but I'm telling you, that's why it's so important to marry the right person, have a strong friendship, so God's love can go back and forth. So that is your base. That's kind of your base relationship, your source of God's love. And then be able to then have something to give. So I think it's important in college to have friends who are both men and women. It's important to be able to know how, and if you are dating, that you're really building a relationship. And again, it's not that sexuality isn't wonderful, but it's so powerful, it will overdrive. It has the potential to overdrive everything. This is not an anti-sexuality talk. It's just saying it's so wonderful and so powerful, it can drive the bus, and then it can kind of fog things up and prevent you from seeing, am I really marrying the right person? Because without that kind of activity, then you find someone where the spark's there. And the spark is there because it's of God and because your personalities just mesh. And then you bring out the best of one another. And you really be able. And I think there's more than one soulmate. I think it's all about the fit. And that's how you really know. That's how you really know whether you're marrying the right person, I think, is just being with that person makes you a better version of you. And for some of us, it's not another person at all. Mrs. Cruz, who I taught religion with people with disabilities with, when I was 17, told me I was called to be a priest. I had a macro personality. Just a lot of people, just a lot of relationships, a lot of friends, and then a deep relationship, quiet in my own self. And everyone has a different call. But I think the big thing is, you don't want to go to a relationship need. When you ever hear someone say, my gosh, my life is awful, I need someone in my life in order for me to be happy, that's a flag. You want to go to a relationship as a full person. And the more you know who you are, the more that you're healthy and can meet your own needs, the more you know what you like and you don't like, then the easier it is for you to be able to know when someone else clicks with you. And they'll know who you are, so they know if they click with you. When I was in seminary, my third year, I was in counseling. He was awesome. Because up until that point, I was like 36, 34. I was a comedian. I was a performer. I was able to become whatever anybody wanted me to be. And that would have been really difficult for me to ever know even who real friends were, because I didn't even really know. I remember the day it broke, he actually made me pick a favorite color. I like them all. Just pick a favorite color. Oh, won't say what the swear words I said, but it's just, I said, darn it, red, you know. But it's part of being able to claim who we are. And I think so when dating then, I hope this is not a negative thing at all. This is like the purpose of dating and the purpose, you know, before if you want to be married someday or not, is being able to say, how can I develop the skills of being a good friend and being in a relationship? How can I take care of myself and be a person to know what I need, who I am, what do I enjoy, and people I can share that with. I'm telling you, counseling can be really helpful, but then you want to go to a relationship goal. I'll end with one image. I'm sorry, I went way over. You know who Shel Silverstein is? He's a bald guy and writes kids' poems. He wrote Where the Sidewalk Ends. He wrote The Giving Tree. And he wrote this book called The Missing Piece. Have you ever, I should have brought it, I didn't, God just gave it to me right now. And The Missing Piece is like a wedge of pie, you know, but it's, I don't know what it is, you know, it's whatever that material it is in the drawing. And he's looking for his missing piece, and some are too big or some are too small. And finally, he realized that it wasn't about finding your missing piece. And he pushed himself up. He's a wedge, right? And he rolled, and as he rolled, there's something out of that, but, and he eventually became a circle that could roll. And he found the big O, and they became friends together. And certainly that, maybe this is just a projection of my own personal experience, but to me that makes a lot of sense in many things. Instead of finding, you know, someone to complete me, it's going on the process of growing as an individual, you know, and being able to be, you know, a happy, healthy individual. And then, as a whole, being able to find someone to live my life with. Now, I covered a lot of territory. Any questions? Does that make any sense? I hope that's a little, is that close to what you wanted me to share? Yeah, and probably a whole. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, you can go.
I just have a question about annulment.
Sure.
You said that it can be very good. However, is it? Is it still good if it's just one person rather than a couple coming together and saying?
Okay. Oh, I just want to make a couple. All right. So, two people married, and again, when two people married, they have all. I mean, again, I've done this a lot. People mean well. They really believe they're called. That's really important, you know. And so then, after the fact, let's say 10 years later, when it's obvious. Well, now. When it usually happens is one of them wants to be married again. And so the church is still saying, institutionally, we still assume that there's a bond there, even though in both of their hearts they usually know otherwise. You do not have to have both. I've had cases where the woman does not want even her ex-husband to know because it was an abusive situation and she was even in danger of her life, she thought. So usually only one person has to want the annulment, but the other person is usually notified, and they can give their side on it if they want. But you do not need both people for the annulment after a divorce. Only one person, you know, has to go fill out the paperwork. Does that help at all? Okay, I'm sorry. So it's more complicated?
It's more complicated.
So are you saying, is someone saying, what if one of the people still believe it's a marriage?
Yeah, or you know, the one person who wanted the divorce was really the only one who wanted it.
Right.
And they're the one who sees it as a
Right.
mistake.
That is the tricky thing, the unfortunate thing about an annulment is if one of the people believe there's still a bond there. And it's just painful. And sometimes they're denied, no, there is a bond there. But usually, when one person thinks there's no bond there, that at least in that person, for a person to say, I'm yours forever, and then to later to say, that it's not there, that usually says that at least that person was not ready to be married or capable of entering into it.
And I think the question is, in that case, is annulment a good thing?
If that person who wanted the annulment, if that person wants to be married again in the church, they need it in order to be married again. What's hard is, if you're siding or if you're the person, if you are the other person who believes that there was a marriage, it's very painful. But it's always painful when your spouse leaves you for another person. And sometimes it may be there, or it just may be a real painful situation to accept that someone does not feel as connected to you as you feel to them. And you're right, as far as it being a good thing, I was saying for the person who wants it, it's often healing. But it's always going to be painful for a person who feels that they were left and they're so committed to that person. And that's always going to be a painful situation. Does that help at all? Does it? Sure, I'd be happy to talk with you. And sometimes it's just painful. And there's a million different scenarios. Thank you very much.